Today we're going to talk about types of employment. There's a few technical concepts here, but it'll all boil down to probably one simple example for almost all of you. And the most important thing to focus on, at least initially, is the taxes that are involved in this. So we have two major types of employment. The first is called W-2, and the second 1099. W-2 and 1099 are the name of the tax forms that are used in these different types of employment. And W-2 is what we think of when we think of normal employment. You're hired by the company, you're an employee of the company, you're paid for your time, generally including overtime, although not always, it depends. And there will always be some type of benefits included. Your employer will pay part of your taxes for you. It'll just be withheld from your paycheck automatically. And they also provide certain types of insurance for you. With a 1099, that's a self-employed independent contractor, freelancer, sometimes just called contractor. And in this case, you're hired to fulfill a role, and your employment's based on a contract that you have agreed on with the employer. This is theoretically a time-limited position. It's not permanent employment. And there's usually no benefits or no insurance provided. Most importantly is you pay self-employment taxes, which is, if you've never worked a 1099 position before, can be quite significant. All right, to get into the details a little bit on W-2, again, this is our typical employee hired by the company. There's a link to the IRS website that tells you all about the W-2 form that this refers to. It's not that interesting. And the employer pays some of your taxes for you. As I mentioned, it's just deducted from your paycheck before you get your check. Now, generally we think of W-2 as permanent positions, but they can also be temporary. For example, they hired you. Part of the terms of employment is that the job lasts for 1 month or 3 months or something like that. If it is permanent, it's only permanent except that for most employers, they have this concept of at will. And at will means that they can terminate your employment for any reason or no reason. It doesn't mean if you're great in your job that you can be assured that you'll keep it. The employer can actually terminate you at any time, and there's not much you can necessarily do about that. Of course, most employers are hiring you because they want people to work there, so they don't just get rid of people for no reason generally, but they have this option to do so if it serves the purposes of their business. When you apply for a job and they want to hire you, they'll send you an employment offer. Employment offer will give you the details, how much you get paid, what benefits are included, how many hours you'll work, potentially your schedule, things of that nature. It's kind of, here's what we have to offer you. At that point, it's important to know you can negotiate. If you're not happy with what they're offering you, if you think you should make more money or you need a different schedule or something along those lines, that's when you can reply to it and to negotiate with them to hopefully get what it is you need to make this an acceptable offer. It's critical, though, that you do inform them immediately if you are going to accept that offer. If you get the offer and it's good, looks good to you, you're not hired yet. You have to reply and say yes and complete the process. We had somebody who got an employment offer here, and didn't realize they needed to reply. They thought, well, oh, cool, I got the offer, I got the job, all good. But it wasn't, because they didn't reply to say yes. When they finally did follow up asking about their schedule, they said, well, you never replied to the offer, so we gave it to somebody else. We thought you weren't interested. So if you get that offer, respond to it as quickly as you can. You have to negotiate. There's something you want to negotiate on, that's fine, but do it in a timely manner because otherwise you could lose the opportunity. W-2 employees, generally, if you're full-time, and different companies have different criteria for what is full-time, you'll generally get health insurance, either paid in full or part. And in case you don't know, health insurance is quite expensive generally. So this might be a pretty substantial amount of money. So it's important to consider that as part of the offer. There will be some kind of paid time off. According to our labor laws, there will always be some sick time, but there could also be vacation time, paid holidays, and most companies handle this a little bit differently. So it's important to understand what exactly their paid time off policy is and how it works. All right, so next we talk about 1099. This is the self-employed independent contractor. And again, 1099 is just the name of the tax form that we use. You can read more about it at that IRS link if you'd like. And what's significant here is that as a self-employed independent contractor, your responsibility for your own taxes, including self-employment taxes. So those taxes that normally your employer would just take out of your paycheck for you automatically, they don't. And so you're going to be responsible for paying them in the end. If you're used to filing your taxes and getting a refund, generally with 1099 position, if you make any reasonable amount of money, you're probably going to be paying taxes instead of getting a refund. So you have to save your money and be prepared for that. How much? Well, taxes are typically 1/3 of your income. So whatever you're making, save 1/3 of it as kind of an estimate on how much your taxes may be. On the upside, you can claim business expense deductions. So certain expenses you have for doing the job, you can actually deduct as expenses. And I'm not an expert in this, but I believe that, for example, drivers for Uber and Lyft are 1099 self-employed independent contractors. And so they can deduct some of the expenses they have with their car, with their vehicle, against the money that they would normally owe in taxes. So that's important. It can be a big benefit to it, but you have to keep very careful records. So there's some work on your end in terms of tracking your expenses and your income so that you understand what your taxes are going to be. It's not really the simplest thing to do. So if you do ever work a 1099 job, please make sure that you understand what you're getting yourself into. Now, these jobs are, as a concept, time limited by the contract. So you're only going to be employed in this role for a certain finite amount of time. So it's not permanent employment. You can't think of yourself as this is your career-long job in most cases. Traditionally, it's been true that contractors can set their own hours. That is, you're hired to fulfill a role, and how you do that is up to you. When you do that, it's up to you. I mean, you may have deadlines, but if you want to work 2 hours a day or 10 hours a day, middle of the night, well, that's up to you. But this isn't necessarily going to be true, and often the contract will specify when you do need to put that time in. Also, since it's a contract, you're one party in the contract, so in theory, you can tell them how much your services cost. In this modern age, that's just really not how things work. So although in theory it's a benefit, the reality is the company will probably just tell you what they do pay and you can take it or leave it. All right, so here's kind of a technical thing that isn't necessarily something you need to worry about too much, but you should be aware of what it means because you'll see this in job listings sometimes. And it's the concept of exempt or non-exempt. And the word exempt just means, well, it doesn't apply to you. If you're exempt from something, well, it's not for you. If you're non-exempt, it means that it does apply to you. Kind of as simple as that. And in this case, what it's talking about is that if you're non-exempt, it means you are covered under the Fair Labor Standards Act, FLSA. And most important part of that is that you get paid for the time that you work. If you work 4 hours, you get paid for 4 hours. If you work more hours than you're scheduled for, then you get paid overtime. You're going to get paid minimum wage or more. And this is going to be most employment and almost all entry-level jobs. So the next job you get is most likely going to be non-exempt, and you probably want it to be a W-2 job because that's going to be the best option for most people. Right, so exempt is a real thing, and this is generally for executives and other higher level professional jobs. There's a couple of criteria that are used to determine what is exempt. And exempt means, well, you're not covered by that FLSA law. So you don't get paid overtime. It's the main thing. But this is a type of a job where you have a lot of either experience or education in a specific area. And in your role, you have a lot of decision making and judgment that's required. And so later in your career, well, you may end up in an exempt position, but this is not too common, to be honest. Okay. And so really the answer to the test is non-exempt W-2 is probably what you should be looking for. The non-exempt, almost for certain, and W-2, I would say at least 90% of the students who attend CDP, W-2 is going to be the best option. It's good for you because, well, it's about you get paid for your time. And even if it's overtime or whatever time you put into the job, you'll get paid for, which is good. And the job offer will probably have some additional things which are good for you. Remember, your employer will help pay part of your taxes for you. It comes out of your paycheck, so you're still paying, but it really simplifies your life and when it comes to be tax time. When you get that offer though, consider all the benefits because it's not just your hourly rate or your rate of pay. That's significant, but it's not the only form of compensation. The number of hours you get is also important. The flexibility of your schedule might be really important to you. If you need to be able to schedule outside appointments periodically and you need that job to be flexible to you on those kinds of issues, if you can only work certain hours and you can make that work with this employer, that might be a very significant benefit that actually makes the job work for you. Paid time off. This can be really different between different companies. So take a look. Well, what kind of vacation time does it offer? What kind of does it pay holidays? How much sick time does it offer? How do they handle this? What's the policy for requesting paid time off? That can vary a great deal, and that might be very significant to you. Insurance. So I mentioned before that W-2 will offer certain types of insurance. And so the certain types of insurance are things like if you get injured on the job, the company will have workers' comp, for example, things like that. But health insurance is something that will be offered to you as a benefit, typically if it's a full-time position. And again, different companies have different criteria. It could be 20 hours a week is considered full-time and qualifies for health insurance. Could be 30, could be 40. It just depends on the business. And generally, employers will pay part of your health insurance, but they might pay all of it. It depends. That can be quite a bit of quite a bit of money. So you really should take into consideration how much of a financial benefit that is to you. Find out what health system they offer this insurance through. That might be important to you. So this is all part of what we call the compensation package. It's basically what's in it for you if you take this offer of employment. If any of the elements of that offer are things that you don't work for you can't accept for one reason or another, try to negotiate with it. Talk to a job developer to get some help on that. It's good to respond quickly, but you don't have to respond to them instantly. Get some advice and think it through carefully, and then tell them what it is that you need and see if you can work it out. If they have no flexibility, well, you'll just have to decide if you can accept it or not. But it's really important to consider the entirety of what they're offering you. And so again, when you're looking for a job, it may mention if it's exempt or non-exempt. Usually it won't, and most jobs will be non-exempt, so probably don't need to worry about it. But you should definitely be looking for W-2 employment, in our opinion, because of the tax situation, the benefit situation, and things of that nature. Sometimes people will find a 1099 job that's a really good opportunity for them. They can gain some work experience, they can make some money, and then potentially leverage that to get themselves into a W-2 job later. But I'd be extremely cautious with 1099 employment because the tax situation is really complex.